So this is how you know Russia has jumped the shark officially. I mean, there was Russia asking China for help in terms of military arsenal that it could direct at Ukraine. And then there is, well, this news just crossing that some Russian state TV hosts are calling for reparations from the United States over the sanctions we've put in place. Putin's lapdogs, it's reported, are demanding the return of Alaska and California's Fort Ross and threatening nuclear strikes on the U.S., calling for public hangings in Ukraine if they don't get these reparations. My gosh, I mean, the world is like spinning out of control at a very rapid rate. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. A reminder that portions of today's show are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. There has clearly never been a better time to invest in precious metals, specifically gold, as I've been telling you all along. So do go to legacypminvestments.com. Do give them a call. You can tell them I sent you. They'll take very, very good care of you. Legacypminvestments.com to figure out how to get a gold-backed IRA or the actual stuff today. This is pretty wild, and of course surrogates will say wild things. I get that, but the rhetoric is getting ratcheted up, and I suspect this is in part because Russia is realizing that it's effectively not succeeding in this mission. Don't forget, he thought that this would just take a few days, and now we're going on a few weeks here, and Kiev still has not folded to the Russian aggression. So clearly he being Vladimir Putin, got some very bad intel from his military ops. And now he's sort of boxed in, right? What does he do? He's flailing about right now. And I think it's really important that calmer heads here prevail. And this is one of the reasons why the discussions this week in Rome between our head of NSC, Jake Sullivan, and the Chinese were extremely important, because don't forget, China thrives on stability, whereas Putin's thriving on chaos. So we've got to hope that they want that stability in the world, as opposed to encouraging this madman, which he clearly is turning out to be absolutely a madman. And then you get all these crazy people on state TV, perhaps trying to double down after they had that incident this week. That would be yesterday, where one of the producers or researchers came up with a sign saying no war. She's now apparently in jail, because you can't do that in Russia. You can't actually have a different opinion. It's now punishable by 15 years in jail, and you wonder why nobody trusts the system there. I want to get a little bit more in detail about these crazy demands that they're making, as well as talk a little bit about Joe Biden heading now to Europe to try and sit down with the Europeans. The Europeans have been very late to this, but they're trying to make up for some lost ground. We'll talk about that. But first, just another quick note from one of our sponsors, Select Quote. You know, life insurance is really important. I think most of you probably have it, as you should. I do. It's absolutely critical. To me, it's sort of the cost of doing business. If you have anybody in this world that cares about you, you need to make sure that they're provided for in the event that you're not here. So probably a lot of you have done that. Whole insurance is a wonderful vehicle to look at, but it's expensive. And so if you're trying to bridge the gap between how much you have in whole and how much you can get in term, I've got an excellent solution for you. I want you to go to selectquote.com, where you can get very inexpensive term insurance. There's an example of a 40-year-old man with high blood pressure who got a 10-year, $500,000 policy for only $19 a month. $19 a month. So again, this is something that you need. While you may have the whole insurance, which often is a very good investment vehicle for some people, you can supplement with this term insurance that's very inexpensive, and it really helps to round out the overall protection that you've got for your family. The quotes are 100% free. They only take a few minutes, and I really encourage you to do this. Just take a few minutes out of your day. Go to selectquote.com. Again, that's selectquote.com, and see how you can make sure that your family is better prepared. You want to protect everything that you've worked for. You want to protect your family. Full details on sample policy and carrier ratings at selectquote.com/commercials. Prices could vary by health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states. The other company I want to tell you about, this is great. They just came on board one of the newest sponsors for our program here, and it's Healthy Cell. I'm a big believer in being healthy, staying healthy, taking my vitamins, but I actually just learned this, and this is thanks to the CEO. He was talking to me about their product, and this, I could never figure out why doctors were like, Trish, make sure you take your vitamin D with a glass of milk, and sometimes they're saying, look, try and take it with dinner. The reason is you can't absorb those vitamins. You can't absorb them when you take them in their traditional pill-like form. So Healthy Cell has found a way around this. It tastes really good. These are these little packets. You just take them off, you open them up, you can down it, you can put it in with another drink. They taste, as I said, good on their own, and there's no binder, there's no mixing that you need to do unless you want to, and there's no coatings, there's no fillers. So this is really good, healthy stuff. It's a great way to get your vitamins every single day. You can as I said, just mix it in something with water if you want, or just down it. It's a small pack gel, and it gives you 165% more absorption than you would get if you just took the regular tablets. So it's a good thing to do. HealthyCell.com is the website, and if you use my name, you will get a 20% discount. So make sure you type in Trish. Healthy Cell, HealthyCell, CELL.com. Use my name for your 20% discount on your first order of any product. I think you'll really like it. It's important to stay healthy right now. But back to what's going on with the world that is not so healthy right now, right? I mean, this is a world that just increasingly feels very, very fragile. And I think at some point we have to do the autopsy as to why this is, but I just got to say, like, everything feels like we're on the brink of destruction. Russia now calling, as I said, for reparations. These pundits over at their state media somehow think that the answer is to to give Russia Alaska and California. And that's a result of the West's economic sanctions. You know what I'm going to tell you? This means that the sanctions are working. They're actually hurting. This guy in particular, this Kremlin host, is all upset because he says he's losing his villas on Lake Como. He's actually not losing them per se. In fact, I don't think he's been individually sanctioned. I could be wrong on that. But he's not actually losing them. One just knows that they're effectively, if he's been sanctioned, freezing those assets, right? I don't know as he's been individually sanctioned, but this is all just, this is rhetoric, right? It's a war of words, and it can escalate into a really dangerous place. So I caution against that, but I would also say that it may be proof that Russia is in so far over its head. As I said, Russia's jumped the shark on this one. There's no easy off-ramp for Vladimir Putin because the world is now shunning him. He is risking becoming the sort of North Korean-like figure of Europe. I think that it's pretty much certain that that's where he's heading at this point as the world continues to watch all the destruction happening in Ukraine. And we're looking at this and saying, why? Why did this have to be? Don't forget, 11 million people in Russia have relatives in Ukraine. So I think a lot of the Russian people are looking at this and saying, why did this have to be? We're getting word now that so many soldiers have been killed. There's estimates by American media of between 2,000 and 6,000. Keep in mind, it's very difficult to know how many really. The Ukrainians have said upwards of 6,000. The Americans are saying between 2,000 and 6,000, trying to be cautious. But until this is all said and done, it's unclear just exactly how many people have died. Unfortunately, too many. Right? I think that's the bottom line here. And you have to say, why was he willing to go in and engage in all of this destruction and lose so much? There are now reports of 11 senior military officials for Russia that have died as a result of this, 3 generals that have died as a result of this. And again, you say, for what? So you're left with a country that's completely bombed out with a bunch of people that have either left, or maybe those that have stayed really hate you and will never forgive you for what has happened. The sort of lack of sensibility here is pretty atrocious. And it reminds us, I think, of a different era, of a different time. Don't forget, he was obsessed with Napoleon and the war books of yesteryear. In sort of today's day and time, I would think that one would want to look at this logically, economically, right? What do you really gain from Ukraine other than territory? He has an ambition of uniting these former Soviet Union countries, but the world's moved on. And if you don't have the people wanting to be part of that, what are you really doing? And I would point out, you're not gaining anything economically. You're gaining a disaster, a place that's going to be needing a total rebuild, which Putin and Russia will not put the resources into building. And so it's pretty tragic. It feels like such an absolute total waste. And the idea that we're here now looking at all of these deaths, that we're looking at all of this destruction is pretty horrific. I should point out that the sanctions are being returned by Russia. They have sanctioned now 13 Americans, including Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, our Secretary of State, our Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, Mark Milley, Jake Sullivan, our National Security Advisor, Bill Burns, the Director of the CIA, Jen Psaki, the Press Secretary. The list goes on and on. They also, interestingly, sanctioned Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton as well. But the reality still is we are the world's largest economy. We are still the world's reserve currency. And because of that, we have the upper hand when it comes to sanctions. Now, one of the challenges with sanctions, I keep pointing out, is that you've got to have everybody on board, right? So it's one thing for us to sanction Russian energy. You need more countries out there sanctioning Russian energy, and we need to be able to enforce the sanctions as well. So the idea being, look, if you're doing business with Russia, you can't do business with us. I think we've got to be consistent here, which is why I would encourage Europe to very quickly get itself off that Russian energy as of like yesterday. The idea that they're still importing Russian natural gas is pretty wild. Don't forget, they get about 45% of their overall Russian gas or overall natural gas intake from Russia. That's got to get supplemented from some other place, because you just can't be dependent on Russia, clearly, in light of all this. It's surprising that Angela Merkel ever went for this, the Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2. You don't need any of it, right? What you need is your own supply. And if you don't have your very own supply, you need to be working with friends, with allies, not with foes like Russia. So that's pretty critical. I think we need to make sure that in some way, shape, or form, that other countries as well start to feel the squeeze. We don't want them doing business with Russia. Otherwise, the sanctions really don't have the intended effect. So complicated stuff and difficult stuff, but it's kind of like, look, you're with us or against us in light of all this. Again, Europe needs to be energy independent. The USA needs to be energy independent. We need to double down right now on all of these drilling permits. We need to get Keystone green lighted. I can't emphasize that enough. Energy independence is a matter of national security. And so while we may have a lot of high hopes for green energy, and I'm not going to dispute that we shouldn't, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, getting all of that online right now is pretty much close to impossible. As such, we need to really make an emphasis, put forward a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan to get all that up and running, but simultaneously make sure that you've got something in the interim. You can't be naive about this stuff. It is a matter of national security. We need to make sure that all of our energy capacity is up, running, and growing, right? I mean, that's what needs to absolutely happen. Otherwise, we will be looking at $9 gasoline. I want to point out, in today's market, you are seeing oil prices down slightly in the high 90s per barrel of oil. Don't forget, it had gone up to 130 and change in overnight trading just a week or two ago. The reason now you're seeing it decline is because China has come out with a mandatory shutdown because it's got an increase in cases of COVID. So I do suspect that the decline in energy prices is very temporary. You saw today's number on inflation. We're looking at a 10% increase in consumer prices, wholesale prices. It'll eventually catch up to consumer prices, which have already increased 7.9% since last year. But the latest read now, as I predicted we'd see 10% on producer prices. Here we are. Sure enough, it's here right now this month, a 10% increase year over year in the prices that producers pay for goods. So these are wholesale prices, right? Well, what happens? A producer pays that much more for goods, and that producer has to pass that on to consumers. Otherwise, it eats into profitability. And right now, we've shown a willingness for the consumer to absorb that. And so they do pay the higher prices, which leads to higher consumer prices, and this thing is off and running. Now, the Fed is meeting today, the first of its two-day meeting. We'll find out tomorrow whether or not it followed through on its promise to increase interest rates by 25 basis points. The expectation is that it will, and that will help on the margin. But look, we've got a serious inflation problem, and we had a serious inflation problem long before this Russia thing. It's disingenuous, frankly, for the administration to sit there and tell us, well, it's all Putin's fault. No, it will be Putin's fault. But what we've got thus far, this 10% increase in wholesale prices, this 7.9% increase in consumer prices, that is actually full on Joe Biden and Jerome Powell's fault. That's our fault. We got to put that on us. Now, it's going to get worse, because you are taking so much energy offline, and we don't have, at present, a way to fill that gap. And so we've got to get creative about that. Again, I go back to, you've got to make sure that you are getting oil from U.S. supplies. The other thing that I think is important is we've got to get Vladimir Putin and his influence in Venezuela out of our hemisphere. That's just critical for us in terms of, once again, our security. So all of this stuff is intertwined, and I think we'll know more, of course, tomorrow with the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve has missed the mark. I've said this repeatedly. They had an opportunity to raise much earlier. They didn't. Finally, they're getting around to it. But is it too little, too late? We'll see how it's interpreted in the markets, of course, going forward this week. I would think something is better than nothing, and hopefully investors can be mature about it, because this has certainly been telegraphed over and over and over again. Just a quick reminder, if you're not following me on social media, please make sure that you do. Make sure that you have subscribed to this channel. Make sure you like this video. Feel free to comment below. Do you think that Russia has completely spiraled out of control like I do? Do you think that the Federal Reserve is a day late, a dollar short, as I do? I'm curious to hear your comments, so feel free to comment there below, like the video, share with your friends, and I'd love to see you over on my locals channel, trishregan.locals.com, as well as my website, trishintel.com, where we have all your news and information. Again, trishintel.com. Regularly updated with all the biggest stories of the day. I look forward to seeing you on all of these platforms. And of course, we're going to talk more tomorrow. Big Fed Day. See you then.